Good evening and welcome to the Walker. This year marks 40 years of the Insights Design Lecture Series. I'm Asli Altay. I'm the head of design, communications, and content here at the Walker. And it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to tonight's talk. Thank you all for joining us. It's wonderful to see such a great group of people interested in design. Since we have you all here, I also like to use this opportunity to announce the upcoming inaugural Walker Design Triennial, happening this October, curated by Joseph Grima and titled Beyond Materialism. It is hard to believe, but when the Insights Design Lecture Series debuted at the Walker Art Center in March of 1986, the Apple Macintosh was barely 2 years old. The brainchild of Mark Odegaard, the then president of the Minnesota Graphic Design Association, and organized with the Walker's education team. The early years of the series welcomed the virtual who's who of the late 20th century designers, from Muriel Cooper and Wolfgang Weingart to April Greenman and Apple's first design director, Clement Mock. As the field of design has expanded, so has the scope of the series. Design shapes how we see, communicate, and move through the world. In a moment when the velocity of images, technologies, and ideas continues to accelerate, creating spaces like this to reflect on design and hear directly from the people shaping its direction feels more important than ever. This is why insights matter. For 40 years, the Walker's Insights series and its online archive have been an invaluable forum for professionals, students, and anyone interested in design. And here's to another 40. As we kick off a new decade of the very best in design, I encourage you to come back next week for Zach Kais, and the week after, on March 18, Michael Sina and Hassan Rahim on March 25. Before I hand it off to Mark Owens, I would like to thank our partners, AIGA Minnesota. If you are curious about what they're up to, Emily is here. Find her after the talk. I would like to thank Shopko Printing for their continued support, and a big thank you to our Walker Design Studio. Shout out to Andrew Bogart, who designed the poster this year, our colleagues in marketing, Walker Shop, the event production team that makes these evenings possible. And with that, I'd like to welcome the Walker Design Director, Mark Owens, to introduce tonight's wonderful speakers. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Hi, good evening. I'm Mark Owens, the design director here at the Walker Art Center, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to this, the 40th year of the Insights Design Lecture Series. These past several weeks have been difficult times in the Twin Cities, and it feels particularly good to just be able to come together tonight. But before we celebrate this big milestone, I think a brief apology is in order. When we were considering who to invite this year, I looked back at the long list of previous Insight speakers, and I was frankly surprised that Kirsty Carter and Emma Thomas had not already been here on the stage. Surely they had already presented in 2016, or perhaps 2010? Their work together with the London-based studio, A Practice for Everyday Life, has stood at the forefront of design for arts and culture for the past 2 decades. And they might just as well have been here for Insight's 30th anniversary rather than their 40th. So I want to start by apologizing for the delay. Founded in 2003, APFEL, as it is sometimes known, is, quote, the art world's favorite studio, as their bio states. And it is not hyperbole. Through a deep dialogue with artists, curators, architects, and the themes, concepts, and materials of art and exhibition making, the studio has created scores of publications, exhibitions, identities, and websites for a truly mind-boggling roster of clients across commerce and culture. Their broadly conceptual and highly collaborative approach has shaped identities and exhibition design for the 2022 Venice Biennale, the Cam Gulbenkian in Lisbon, the Hepworth Wakefield, the most recent installment of Site Santa Fe, and ongoing work for the British Museum, which we will probably talk about a little later, as well as exhibitions for the Whitney, the V&A, and the Tate, among others. They are also widely known for their incredible publication design, monographs for artists like Yoko Ono, Karle Schneemann, Noah Davis, and Lee Miller, and the exhibition and catalog for the recent show The Shakers at the Design Museum at Vitra. I recently purchased their book on the history of Vitra for Phaidon, and chances are some of your favorite art books have been designed by a practice for everyday life. You can even find some in the Walker's Idea House 3 design shop. And we also have some out in the shop outside. Typography is also a central component of their work, including custom type design for Elle Magazine. And in 2020, they founded APFEL Type Foundry to showcase type commissions and retail fonts. Kirsty and Emma also serve as co-presidents of the Alliance Graphique International, the AGI in the UK. At a moment when the rapid adoption of AI tools risks depersonalizing human communication and eroding our sense of accountability, both to our work and to one another, there's something both remarkable and frankly reassuring about design that feels attended to in each and every detail. As their name suggests, APFEL represents the best impulses of our particular corner of the wider world of design. Refined, sophisticated, and cosmopolitan, but always with a beating heart and a firm belief that art and culture are an indispensable part of everyday life. It's no secret here at the Walker that the design studio curates the Insight series as equal parts professional peers and fans of design. I remember sending a cold email and first visiting the old APFEL studio in Bethnal Green in 2013, and I was fortunate to include some of their work in an exhibition I curated a decade ago. We've crossed paths now and again over the years, but I must admit that I've always thought of Kirsty and Emma, at least in my own mind, as professional older siblings, models to look up to, but also a little intimidating. Tonight, as we celebrate 40 years of Insights, I'm grateful to be able to think of them as friends. So please join me in giving them a long overdue welcome to the Walker.
Well, thanks, Mark. It's a lovely welcome.
So, hello, and it's wonderful to be here this evening. We wanted to begin by saying how grateful we are to be welcomed here by the Walker Arts Centre. Our practice has always been rooted in collaboration and in the idea that things are shaped collectively through dialogue, across disciplines, across communities. That feels especially meaningful to reflect on that as we come together this evening. Firstly, a very special thank you to Mark and the design team at Walker, who organised us to be here. Oh, and yeah, by the way, I'm Kirsty.
Yeah, and I'm Emma. Yeah, thank you all for coming this evening. We feel incredibly lucky to be here. So we started a practice for everyday life, our studio, in East London 23 years ago. As Mark was saying, our work is in art direction and graphic design for arts and culture. Our beginning was always working with artists and curators on books or exhibitions when we met at college. We still work in this way, though the scale and breadth of projects is wider now, working with museums and art foundations all over the world, to working with brands such as Erdem and Aesop on visual identity projects or campaigns. But on tonight's talk, we're going to focus on our work with artists. It's where we began, and it's the work that's really shaped us. It's the foundation of the studio and underpins our studio culture and our culture with clients.
We actually began working together 25 years ago at the Royal College. We studied graphic design there. We graduated. When we graduated, we couldn't really imagine working for anyone else. And we just wanted to continue what we had started together. Over the years, we've brought many people into APFEL. We're now a team of 8. Daniel, Joe, Liv, Matt, Billy, and then Emma and I.
And Tom.
And Tom, sorry, Miss Tom. We love we love our team and the range of backgrounds they come from: publishing, jewelry design, graphic design, art history, and illustration.
And really, our projects have always been a process of collaboration with each other, with the team in the studio, but also with our clients and other people that we bring into every project. We really love to work collaboratively and closely with the cultural institutions and brands or artists across the identity work, editorial design, books, exhibitions, digital and type design. But really that shared love and interest in arts and subjects and people that we work with is what's super important.
We really enjoy the research aspect of what we do. Our work is driven by ideas as much as it is visual. The best way to describe our work is to talk you through some projects. If we're working with an artist or a brand or an architect, we're always trying to get to the essence of what they're about and who they are, and help communicate that to the world. That's what drives us. Everything's unique with every project.
The idea of working with arts and culture and for arts and culture and creating something that then goes back into forming a part of culture is really what drives us. So Site Santa Fe, one of our most recent projects, was this visual identity for the 12th Site Santa Fe International. It was a sprawling citywide exhibition bringing together 98 artists across 14 venues in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The exhibition, titled Once Within a Time, was conceived by the curator Cecilia Alemani. The title comes from a film by experimental filmmaker Godfrey Reggio. So in his film, Reggio intertwines fairy tale atmospheres with strange landscapes. His circular narrative structures blur the fantastical and the mundane, looping back to their beginnings and emphasizing repetition, environmental disconnection, and the cyclical nature of human experience.
Inspired by these ideas, the Biennale places storytelling at its core, focusing on the experiences of several characters connected to Santa Fe. Presented alongside works by international artists, together they explore New Mexico's layered history through voices of more than 90 participants. Our identity responds to these themes of circularity, storytelling, and the blurred line between reality and fantasy. We drew on the visual language of storybooks and science fiction through type, colour, orientation, and collage.
So we took abstracted photographic details from across Santa Fe. These form the foundation of the visual identity, creating new dialogues between contemporary and historical narratives. Our work encompassed the full campaign and communications, from publications and merchandise to exhibition design. It was super fun seeing our identity take shape in different forms across so many different sites in Santa Fe. We also designed a custom typeface and developed a strong colour palette of blues, reds, and gradients inspired by Reggio's films.
These elements carried throughout the exhibition design, the layered images, gradients, and materiality. Figures, voices, and fragmented forms appeared throughout the space, reflecting different perspectives in the exhibition.
So in this biennial, it was slightly different to how we always work. We were also the exhibition designers. It was amazing to work closely with the brilliant production team in Santa Fe to create the effect that you can see here with light and colour and fabric. So we were sending samples back and forth between London and Santa Fe, testing out to try and get these lighting gradients that we'd been so inspired by in the films. So sometimes using things to create these moments of reveal, a sense of mystery in the spaces as you walked around. It was quite unusual and experimental for a sort of art space that took shape across so many different sites.
The accompanying catalogue extends this narrative structure, using colour gradients as the structural device across the publication. Artist profiles were punctuated by graphic interventions such as here, where you see the front cover, and focused on each of the 20 sections of the book.
So the collages and gradients that we created combine in the book spreads and chapter openers. And they're really playful. It's lovely to see them spread across the open foredge of the book as well. So these narratives weaving in, even the way that we approached the image treatment and integrated that into the text. It's so lovely with each exhibition that we get to work on is really delving into the subjects and working closely with the curators to learn something new with every project. So here you see that bold blue gradient from Reggio's film that we used in the exhibition also applied to the book foredge and cover. So we really love working closely with any production person that we collaborate with, in this case our printers Graphius in Belgium, to really push what's possible with production with every project.
A project that led our commission at Site Santa Fe was the visual identity in 2022, the Venice Art Biennale, curated again by Cecilia Alemani. This Biennale is the world's oldest and most prestigious international exhibition of contemporary art. Over 8 months, Venice becomes full of exhibitions, events, and conversations about art, and the identity needed to be appropriate at this enormous scale across the city and internationally.
Cecilia's approach to the curation and the direction of the biennial was a feminist, surrealist, and ecological one. Her vision of emancipation through imagination felt rare and urgent, and it was really exciting to be a part of that. The exhibition title was The Milk of Dreams, which came from a book of surreal stories by the artist Leonore Carrington. Drawing on themes in the exhibition, the graphic identity explores fluidity, identity, re-enchantment, fragmentation, and the relationship between the human and the non-human.
We also loved how the title echoed Venice itself, a city shaped by water, inherently unstable, dreamlike, and already slightly surreal. The exhibition brought together hundreds of newly commissioned works by artists all over the world, the majority who were women or identified as a woman or non-binary, for the first time in the Biennale's history.
For the campaign, we placed artists' work at the forefront of the identity. We focused on details from artworks by Belkis Ayon, Felipe Baitza, Tatsuo Ikeda, and Cecilia Vicuña. They were all united by this motif of eyes. These were symbolic of key ideas running through the exhibition of dreams, identity, the body, and reflection. We spent a long time searching through all 230 artists' works to find the right eyes, ones that would work together both graphically and conceptually.
These were the four eyes that formed the campaign. Here they are on the short exhibition guides.
It was quite difficult to choose them. You had to work with contrast. You had to understand, to see them that they were eyes. You had to understand that. But also to be able to imagine them taking shape and place across all the different objects.
The campaign appeared across vaporetta boats, posters, billboards, banners throughout Venice. These eyes looked back at the public, animating the walls, bridges, buildings, and creating a sense of encounter throughout the city.
The typographic treatment of the title was designed to feel metamorphic, inspired by the water of Venice and transformation. We took classical Roman letter forms and transformed them into something more fluid, organic, and dimensional. The typography moved across media from print to animation and into exhibition spaces and onto the fabric of the city. It was fun to see how the eyes made things come alive, from bookshelves to bridges.
Here's us in London testing this. It was in COVID time, so we weren't travelling very far. So here's the Regent's Canal in East London.
It's trying to test distance. Could you read it at distance? And actually, we didn't get to Venice because of COVID. We didn't get there until everything was installed. So we had to design every aspect of that show from a distance. And so it was such an amazing feeling for so many reasons when we first arrived there for the opening, to see our work across the city on billboards and zipping past us on boats. There were some great surrealist graphic works and dynamic type references in the exhibition that informed the typographic approach that we developed for the identity. These are just some of them. And of course, the Venice tote bag.
The exhibition design in this case was developed in collaboration with architects Forma Phantasma. It included 5 historical capsules set within the main exhibition. Each moment explored themes throughout historical works, and we used the distinct colours and architectural elements to mark those moments.
The accompanying publication was the largest we'd ever worked on, over 1,000 pages across 2 volumes, and designing it during COVID presented huge challenges: global paper shortages, logistical constraints, and the fact that Cecilia wasn't able to meet the artists or us in person throughout that time. So we produced multiple blank dummies in the studio to test weight, paper opacity, binding, and usability. The challenge was to make a book of this scale that could still be opened easily, remain as light as possible, and be affordable while maintaining visual and material integrity. And also the paper had to be available.
The historical capsules appeared in the publication as well, functioning like the exhibition, like exhibitions within an exhibition. The sections helped create a rhythm and pacing, especially important in such a large book.
Next up, the shakers, as Mark mentioned.
So A World in the Making was at the Vitra Design Museum in Germany. It was exploring the legacy of the Shakers, as you will probably know here, less so in Europe, a religious group whose design's ethos was rooted in community, labour and social equality. Today, only 3 remaining people remain practicing the Shaker religion. One of the defining reasons their commitment is to celibacy. So the community cannot procreate, instead have to rely on recruitment.
So our designs for the show centred around a newly commissioned photographic series that we created and art directed in close collaboration with photographer Alex Lesage. Together we developed a body of new photography at the Shaker Museum, which holds the largest collection of Shaker furniture and products, and then the architecture and interiors at Hancock Village and Mount Lebanon Village.
The exhibition and publication examines Shaker design from a contemporary perspective, placing historical objects alongside new commissions by artists and designers. As I mentioned, the first iteration was at the Design Museum in Basel / Germany. It's on the border, and leans more heavily on the historical context. As European audiences are often less than familiar with the Shakers, the exhibition is now travelling in the US, and in this version of there is more contemporary commissions, and this is given a greater emphasis, helping to frame the Shakers' continuing influence on culture today, as well as for reflecting on the community's ideas and values from a contemporary perspective, sometimes critically. We felt a lot of the previous documentation of the Shakers had been well overused. We needed a new contemporary lens on this beautiful world. The publication pairs new photography with a custom sans serif typeface, which letters forms echoes the form of some of the objects from the Shakers. For example, the E is come from the broom, Shaker broom. The layout follows the Shaker principles of symmetry and restraint. The text and the images hang from a peg rail grid, a reoccurring architectural feature. Colour was very important to the Shakers. Often colour means something or signals something. For example, there was a particular blue they often used on their religious buildings, or still do. We used this blue by opening on vivid blue end papers, referencing the white exteriors and the blue interiors of the shaker buildings. The rounded spine echoes the curvature of the shaker tools and domestic objects.
The exhibition design we developed with former Phantasma, who we worked with on the Venice Art Biennale. It used simple textiles and restraint detailing with timber joinery, fabric-lined walls, and interpretation text that we printed on textured paper and then fixed with nails.
These are shaker gift drawings curated by members of the community, primarily the Shaker sisters. They were an expression of spiritual visions, often produced through meditation. These drawings were used as a form of communication, helping to share the Shaker beliefs and, as I mentioned earlier, attract new members.
So the next project we'll talk about is Alexey Brodovitch, Astonish Me. It's a book which accompanied an exhibition at the Barnes Foundation in the US here. Brodovitch was a hugely influential art director of the mid-century, best known for working on Harper's Bazaar from 1934 to 1959.
The book features a custom typeface inspired by Brodovitch's love of the dot and Phaidon, as well as his own lettering for a publication called Ballet that he produced in 1945. Subtle modifications of the angular terminals and unexpected details that reflect the modernist spirit in his work.
These are some examples of his work and layout. You don't know it already. That's the Ballet publication.
Our typeface shifts in scale, angle, and layout throughout the book, echoing Brodovitch's dynamic editorial approach.
So lightweight papers and screen-printed tip-ins gave the publication a magazine-like quality, and it slips into this white slipcase. Collection of really beautiful spreads of his work.
It was amazing to work with such a prestigious institution like the Barnes Foundation in Philadelphia for such a hero of ours, Brodovitch.
And another hero.
We were honoured to design the exhibition graphics, campaign and publication for the first institutional retrospective of the late American artist Noah Davis. The exhibition was first presented at the Barbican in London and Das Minx in Potsdam, Germany. It's since travelled to the Hammer Museum in Los Angeles and is now open at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. The exhibition design was developed in collaboration with some architects called Freehouse, based in London. We embraced together the handcrafted and material approach. The solid walls dissolved into sort of translucent gorge-like structures, echoing the light and openness of Los Angeles, where Davis lived and worked.
The entrance title was constructed from cut letters made from recycled cardboard boxes, referencing the DIY ethos of Davis's underground museum. And then exhibition text was screen printed directly onto the walls for a tactile human quality. So our approach in graphics, we also used them on the marketing campaign. It was really nice to just see that expand across all spaces. And we really enjoy working in this way when you're creating an environment where you can walk through, communicate in all different ways and levels. It's fun to see the posters together.
And that was a billboard campaign throughout London in a similar way. We love his little notes. We made his little notes quite a feature of the exhibition and the book. We were supplied all his notebooks with all these little like anecdotes that he'd written. The publication reflected this balance between structure and disruption. Then there was these scrapbook style sections of like personal images and ephemera that sat alongside the more formal image plate sections, mirroring Davis's engagement with art history and his desire to expand it.
You should go see Noah Davis while it's still on. It's a fantastic show. We're bringing you next to Lisbon, to the CAM, the Gulbenkian space. So we recently worked here creating the visual identity for them, for the Centro d'Arte Moderna Gulbenkian. So our new identity was to coincide with the museum's reopening in September 2024, following an architectural commission by Kengo Kuma. So this is the space that you see here. It was a huge canopy-like structure. So the architecture and the identity were inspired by this concept of engawa in Kuma's new building. Engawa is a principle in Japanese architecture that describes the space between interior and exterior. And first, this idea of the engawa captured CAM's position between the museum and its gardens, and between the institution and the wider city.
The identity centres on this bespoke logo type that responds directly to the architecture, the dynamic nature of CAM's programme. We worked closely with the CAM team over a 12-month period to develop the identity that extended across print, digital communications, the website, merchandise, citywide campaigns, and the exhibition graphics. The letter A within the CAM logo type echoes the curved canopy-like form of the new building. It introduced movement and energy into what was otherwise quite a restrained historical context.
So throughout the project, we're working with the CAM team on engaging new audiences locally, nationally, and internationally. The campaigns amplify this ambition, linking building, landscape, and the city through dynamic and animated visual language across the print and digital campaigns as well.
The flexibility of the graphic system is central to its identity. The logo type can work in many different forms, over the top of images. Like that's what we often like with when we work on identities, that they're light enough that they're not going to override an image or what really is at the forefront, the visual aspect of the identity. It could be used square, landscape, portrait.
Yeah, so layering was key. Here you see it combined over the artist's images, sometimes combined with a bright colour palette, but creating that sense of openness and liveliness, reflecting CAM's new role as a place of cultural exchange. Positioned at the entrance to the Foundation's gardens from the city, the CAM location reinforces this idea of connection between artistic practice, architecture, and public life. The identity was designed to support that role. They have the most beautiful botanical gardens.
The bold blue colour and the graphic motif worked across all different merchandise.
So we developed a very broad set of materials, worked closely with them for a year, and combining the new CAM identity within the broader Gulbenkian identity. And it was really great to see that coming to life in Lisbon and all over Portugal. Fun to see it moving on a tram, for sure.
Another important part of CAM's project was the museum's restaurant. CAM's been well known for having a restaurant since its inception in the 1970s, so there was a real desire to take this into its next chapter as part of the reopening.
The new restaurant's called Mesa de CAM. which translates simply as Cam's Table. It's led by celebrated chef André Mangalis and focuses on seasonal produce with a strong emphasis on collaboration with local suppliers. The name is inspired by the restaurant Central Table. Designed by Kengo Kuma, it's modular in form and allows it to adapt to different dining experiences with ideas of sharing and gathering and flexibility. They can pull it together or push it apart.
For the logo, we added handwriting aspect to the above the cam to bring more of an organic, informal character to a busy restaurant. The restaurant became another place that the institution could engage the public, not just through exhibitions, but through everyday social ritual of eating and drinking together. We move into fashion, but in a very interesting way. J.W. Anderson curated a show that we worked on with an already existing client called Offer Waterman, a gallery in London. The exhibition was called On Foot. It consisted of the exhibition and a publication. As mentioned, the gallery, the art gallery Offer Waterman, used to be William Morris's showroom, so it's got a very historical context in London. And Jonathan wanted the exhibition to unfold like a walk through London, capturing the unexpected juxtapositions that emerge over the journey across the city from his key shop, like the flagship J.W. Anderson shop, to the gallery.
Yeah, so the tapered strokes of the lettering that we made, they reference the sign-written letter forms that we found on historic shop signs, newspaper kiosks, all that vernacular, archival fashion publications, but what you might see walking through the city as well. The gridded image layout responds to the metal framework of Studio Boom's exhibition design, which echoed the panelled walls in Offer Waterman's interior. So we developed the project's visual identity across exhibition graphics, campaign, and the publication that went with it. So the bespoke lettering that we made, this elongated lettering, draws inspiration from sculptural works in the show, from the Miss Dior invitation and works like Hepworth's Elegy, as well as from garments in Anderson's Autumn-Winter 2020 collection.
The publication layers textiles, paper, and imagery, capturing the density and complexity of the London city. Cut-out images, lettering a skirt screened onto the acetate jacket, with paper images beneath, placed over a softback cloth cover.
Yeah, the collection is super beautiful. A lot of it belongs to Jonathan as well. I think this sort of unconventional approach to curating, he could bring together his fashion design pieces from JWA and Loewe in dialogue with works by contemporary British artists from Lucian Freud to Barbara Hepworth and Magdalena Odundo. These are the gridded walls that I was talking about, these panels of beautifully dyed fabrics and gorgeous colours.
The cloth reappears as coloured tip-ins within the sections, marking the hand-dyed linen that was used across the exhibition walls. The installation photography was by a photographer called Thomas Ardankt, and it was in combination with the sort of image plates and created like a visual essay that mirrors the exhibition hang. Famous pigeon, Perth. Infamous London icon.
So it's lovely to work with the fabric in the book as well. So we even used what you see of the reverse of the fabric to make a feature of that, really adding that sort of tactility and emphasising how you look at the details in the artworks and the clothing.
Sheila Hicks, one of our favourite artists. Hard to choose actually when you put a lecture together, but she's up there. This book accompanied an exhibition at the Hepworth Wakefield that we still continue to work with. long time now. It was called Off Grid, and it was celebrating Sheila Hicks's pioneering use of textiles as sculptural materials for over 70 years. We worked closely with her, many visits to her studio in Paris. She lives and works in Paris. Watching her at the loom, it inspired so many ideas for how to approach this book in such a non-conventional way. The publication is a really large format, purposely to reflect the monumental sort of room-filling scale of her work. The image proportions were carefully considered to echo like her sensitivity to space and the architecture which the works were shown in. And then there was this really richly pigmented cover cloth that was cut flush, but soft back. But over time, it reveals, the threads come apart, and then it sort of reveals the construction of the textiles. And then, again, as always, custom photography. This is actually one of our typeface that we customized ourselves again. That was silk screen printed onto the cloth. So it appeared woven into the surface of the cover.
Yeah, hopefully you see the sort of scale of these works. They're incredible.
Always difficult to get that across in a book, but we try.
Yeah, it was a large format as well, so you could really see the detail coming through in the textures and the textiles and the weaving.
And then there was these tall, narrow inserts that acted as chapter dividers, and then the text runs along many different grid lines, as you can see, asymmetric and on an angle. Again, that was to sort of reference a lot of, the sketches and notebooks and really the weaving of type throughout the book.
Yeah, so the text boxes, the text really sort of wove along the warp lines and was annotated from those sketches.
Within the chapters, we set text on a vertical column, spanning the full height of the page, and then with the captions, we interwove them, both imagery and notations, the figures, and they moved off that grid into like sort of forming sort of disruptive moments. And like I mentioned, like typography being woven into books like textiles. She also did a lot of photography herself, so a lot of her photography is featured in the book.
Another artist that we mentioned earlier that was actually in the J.W. Anderson exhibition on foot, Magdalena Odundo. This is a book that we did for her for an exhibition she had at Horton Hall, which was curated by Andrew Bonacina.
She was actually made a dame this year.
I should say dame.
Yes.
So Horton Hall, if you don't know it, it's a grand stately home, and it was built by commissioned by Britain's first Prime Minister, Sir Robert Walpole. So set within these exuberant Palladian interiors of the hall, Odundo's contemporary ceramic and glass works are in dialogue with the building's complex social and political history. So throughout the book, the photography is cropped unusually, emphasising that strange tension between historic and contemporary that runs through Odundo's work. So we tried to capture that with the photography that we created. And title and essay pages were printed onto this unusual, distinctive yellow paper. So the yellow was taken from the exhibition centerpiece sculpture made using historic Wedgwood moulds, through which Odundo explores narratives of slavery, abolition, and activism. This is her. So that wraparound cover of the book has one of Odundo's anthropomorphic vessels. We printed it on a black paper using duotone black and metallic inks. So that combination was quite tricky to get working, to make it visible, but to also echo that luminosity of the burnished clay. It was really trying to represent that in a printed form. So we worked really closely with our printer, this time Healy's in Norfolk, to achieve the right effect.
So this, we're showing you one of our oldest projects in this lecture. The Hepworth Wakefield opened in 2011. It was the largest purpose-built art museum in the UK outside of London at that point. We were commissioned to create its identity in 2007. We were pretty young. I mean, we only graduated in 2003. It was such an honour. We were working closely with David Chipperfield Architects and Simon Wallace, the then director, and Wakefield Council together. The museum houses Wakefield City's biggest, all the collection of not only Hepworth herself, but a lot of British modernists. That's the key part of their collection.
So when we started on the project, the building was still at ground level. It was at this point. We developed the identity in parallel with the architecture, drawing inspiration from the surrounding wharf buildings and the material language of the site.
At the time, a very subtle, light approach to an institutional branding was relatively unusual, but we felt really strongly that it was what this building needed, and Hepworth's work, it's what it demanded, really. We developed a bespoke typeface derived from the angles of the roof lines of David's building, and like Emma mentioned, the surrounding wharf buildings. By using this distinctive bespoke typeface, we could propose this identity that it would be really clear, elegant, and minimal, but remain totally recognizable to belonging to the museum. Our ambition was to develop an identity that would feel appropriate for both historical and contemporary shows, and fundamentally it was born out of Hepworth's work.
So the logotype was sandblasted directly into the concrete. It was a pretty bold and permanent gesture. And one we liked precisely because it would leave a trace, even if the institution were to ever rebrand. But there was no room for error. We tested depth, colour and scale extensively with engineers to avoid damaging the structure, of course. And each letter was letter spaced individually on site on a scissor lift, fortunately without any typos.
This integrated approach extended across all signage, interior and exterior, using the fabric of the building itself so Hepworth's sculptures would remain foregrounded.
Love a car park signage.
Yes.
Yeah, we didn't want to add object signs that would interfere or overpower Hepworth's sculptures, Hepworth's work, which sometimes actually worked at very small scale. You can see here on the left, we even silkscreen printed inside the cabinets of the permanent gallery spaces. We developed a colour palette with this bright teal colour, and that came from the oxidization in Hepworth's bronzes.
We brought quotations into the space across other printed materials, which specifically spoke about the landscape in which Hepworth grew up in, her passion and love of the Yorkshire moors. I think what's really difficult, Barbara Hepworth had her studio in the south of England, in Cornwall, but the Wakefield's in the north of England, and she's so associated with her studio. And I think that was what was really important to everyone. The reason why this building was built was because she grew up and was born there. And the moors, the landscape around there, is you can see that in her work, and it's so important to talk about that. And we really had to emphasize that at the beginning when it opened. Oh, there was a little anecdote here. Let's go back. Emma also grew up in Yorkshire. So this project was really special to our studio because it felt like this connection to Emma.
Yeah,
anyway.
close to home.
Yes. We still work with Hepworth today on special projects, as you saw, some books. But more recently, we were very honoured they came back to us and said, 15 years on, we want to do an extension to the brand. We want you to continue to think about how that could be used. So we developed a new sort of extension to that, some further drawings, and we worked closely with Sophie Burness, Hepworth's granddaughter, to sort of honour that she felt, that what we were doing was respectful to Barbara Hepworth. So we developed a series of graphic illustrations that went across lots of product and merchandise. Same bottle we did in Cannes.
Yeah, back to the typeface for a second. It was really the first time we developed a full font for a museum. We were so pleased working with them that they understood its relevance for the project and how it would allow us to create an identity with a minimal touch but still be really recognisable on everything that they would create. It ultimately allows the designers in the future also a lot of flexibility. They may have the typeface, but they can use it in so many different ways that each time it's recognisable, whatever they create.
We explored the ideas of the terminals being a design choice inspired by those buildings, the roof buildings, like I mentioned earlier, but also sort of a relationship to Hepworth's tool marks that you see on the sculptures. The chisel.
It took months to get the contrast and balance feeling right. And once we were ready, we extended to developing different weights to a medium and a bold. Let's see a bit more of that.
Yeah.
So this next project we talk about is quite recent, actually. It opened just last October. A non-profit space for contemporary art founded by collector Jan Du, based in a historic house on Bedford Square. I love the contrast of this with the Hepworth project.
Jan described herself to us as a woman of many contrasts, bold, playful, and deeply committed to supporting artists beyond her own collection. It was clear that the identity needed to resist those institutional norms.
So we designed a bespoke modular headline typeface built from simple geometric forms and assembled playfully. It reflects ideas of making, plurality, and collaboration, all values central to YDP's programme. The typeface subverts convention through mixing case, oversized punctuation, and alternating counters.
The colour palette brings warmth and energy across print and digital communications, extending into the website, where the logo shapes become like flexible frames for imagery.
And our design for the signage gently led visitors through the building. So rather than creating arrows or things that you might usually see for wayfinding, it just followed the gentle curves echoing the Georgian architecture and metalwork and just leading people through the space, through the curves that it was set on. So here you see some glimpses of those ironworks and artworks as well that were working with these curves that came into the typeface.
As part of the identity, there was a secondary typeface and one alongside the sort of bolder one. And this is a bespoke version of our font that we designed, one of our typefaces that you can buy, called Phaidon. But we customized some glyphs specifically for Jan Du.
You see? Yeah, so you really see those like curves of the metalwork and architecture coming through. and that playfulness again. So it's really quite different to the display face, but we wanted it to have this lightness, but that same sense of playfulness. And they have a lot of fun with it too.
So as you're starting to notice, we've been designing type since the very beginning of our studio. And in 2017, Elle Magazine reached out to us and asked us to be part of a major editorial redesign of Elle UK.
So we developed a bespoke headline typeface we called Elle Play. And this was designed to sit alongside that iconic masthead and Futura, which was their body typeface that had to stay. And the high contrast sans serif that we made introduces this more sort of playful typographic character.
It first appeared in Elle UK September 2017 issue. And then it went on to 12 different international
Titles, yeah.
titles, yes. Trying to find the right word.
Yeah, it was really nice to see it used at all different scales. That was, I suppose, by working so much on the sort of contrast, it needed to work quite small, but it was really, we really enjoy it when they could use it bigger over images. Again, it had that lightness that worked very well when set over imagery, and brought that sort of balance and geometry. I think it worked very well with the photography. It was really inspired by Futura's apexes, so taking Futura that was their body text that had to stay, we kept that sort of defining characteristic of the pointed terminals. Obviously, it's miles away from Futura. Those often project beyond the baseline, but the typeface is built on a geometric structure which allows more generous proportions, particularly in characters such as the O and the M and the C.
The spirit of the typeface draws on the playful and colourful language found throughout the magazine's history, especially the work of art director and photographer Peter Knapp in the 1960s. Here you see that, ascending the baseline.
Nice to see it this big, actually, when I talk
Yes.
about scale.
So type design. So often people ask us this, why type? And I think we often reflect on why. For many years, typefaces existed in our studio as part of projects, but they didn't have a life beyond their original context. And often when working with artists, imagery was often fixed for us. It was the artwork itself. So typography became the primary way in which we could communicate our own self-expression or creative expression. And we spent a great deal of time thinking through type, using it as a conceptual and expressive tool rather than just a purely functional one.
I guess in 2007 was the real turning point for us with the Hepworth. It was the first time we were commissioned to design an entire type family for a project. That experience proved not only to our clients, but to ourselves that we could work at that scale and depth. And from there, the work naturally developed into more complex and ambitious type projects and into fuller type families. Over time, as those typefaces began to circulate, we were increasingly asked whether they could be licensed, particularly the Hepworth typeface, but that was theirs alone. We were also encouraged by Cornell Windlin at Line 2 to make it available. But it wasn't until 2020, during lockdown, that we formalised this strand of our practice into our own type foundry.
It still took us 13 years from that first full family of the Hepworth to finally launching the foundry. Today we've developed a group of various type families in various styles, including Certo, Phaidon, Lining and Pelotti, as well as two display faces called Peripheria and Remnants. They're all available to buy through the type design part of our website. Certo was one of our first typefaces we developed. It's now available in regular, medium, and bold, and each with its partnering oblique. Building on some of those ideas, which were informed by the Hepworth project, we looked back at Edward Johnson's early drawings and sketches of the London Underground typeface. Their geometry, rounded forms, and these sort of uncompromising junctions. We saw parallels on how his hand drawings moved into like industrial letter forms, and that rooted in engraved signage that we love, spend all the time looking at in the underground. These machine movements inspired Certo's monolinear forms and rounded shapes.
Yeah, so these are some of those routed machine-made signs. I think really it was a breakthrough moment, seeing these vernacular engraved signs and looking at them again. These are some ones from the 60s in the Netherlands. The awkward but playful forms with unusual ligatures and uneven details inspired some of those distinctive features of Certo. You see the way the E ends a bit short and some of the sort of unusual proportions. Our aim was to create a sans serif that could function as a true workhorse for us, robust at smaller sizes, but with a strong enough character that we could use it large. We named it Certo, after the author of the book The Practice of Everyday Life, the book that inspired our studio's name.
We published Type as Ready-Made publication with Certo used on the cover. It's essentially a type specimen book for fonts that we released in 2020, but it also includes an essay which we talk more about the ideas and inspirations behind the typefaces that we designed. The Walker shop has a number of them for sale. If you have a chance, go and take a look. Phaidon followed a few years later. It began as sketches for an arts institution in New York, which was planned for the site of a former playing card factory.
So that research into playing card typography led us to a specimen book from the Visual Graphics Corporation. And one typeface in that phototypositor specimen called Solitaire became the starting point for Phaidon. They're named after Murray Friedel, the inventor of the phototypositor. The typeface reflects its 1970s origins with those tall X heights, elongated proportions, and expressive tittles. The dot on the I.
Although the original project never materialized, the New York Gallery never happened, Friedel has since found its way into our projects from a book. For example, we did a book for the Whitney Museum about Hopper, to editorial work, branding, posters, like this book we did for about basilits at the Serpentine Gallery in London. And then we did a poster for Rafa, the cycling company. And then a very important magazine to us. It's a magazine for women called Riposte. It celebrates women in culture. And sometimes we've modified it, like we mentioned earlier, for particular projects like Yandu.
And we love the idea that typefaces can be bought by others, used by others, reinterpreted by others, because each font carries a certain character but remains open to new uses, contexts, and readings over time. We really enjoy seeing what other people create with them too.
The Foundry isn't a separate part of our practice or our client work. It's simply another way for our work to continue to live in the world. We've redesigned how you can find our work, try out our new typefaces really recently. We just launched our new website. It's going to be a really exciting year ahead of us. Mark mentioned in the introduction, we're just we've just started. Well, actually, no, we're kind of fair way through it now. We're developing a new brand identity and set of typefaces for the British Museum in London. It's been amazing. We've had full access to all the collection, the millions of objects. What we love is like we're looking so closely at some of the objects that are the origins of language itself. And that really is, we can't show you, we'd love to show you, but it's really reflected of how we're responding to that brief and the identity. And that's really shaping, I'd say, the next sort of chapter in APFEL, that particular project, because it's so driven by research and really understanding humanity. And yeah, again, I think Mark mentioned we're excited and honoured that we are taking up the co-presidency of the UK chapter of the AGI. And we are very proud to say that we're the first women to do so.
Thanks. So alongside that, we're also beginning new projects with the Science Museum, a contemporary museum in Slovenia called Musée l'Art, working once again with David Chipperfield Architects. We're working with an amazing, lovely artist, Ito Barada, for the French Pavilion in the Venice Art Biennale this year. So you should go see that as well if you have the opportunity. So as you can probably tell, we run a full and intense and fun studio. We love that energy that brings to our lives and the team that we work with. So thanks to them also. So that's it. We've come to the end of our talk today. We're going to have a short Q&A, I think, with Mark. But thanks very much for listening and for coming along today. Thank you.